Good morning, everyone. Hello. Let me hear one hello, please. Awesome. Now that sounds nice. So thank you very much for joining. So for starters, my name is Dr. George Wainaina. I like being called Wainaina or George. Not a formality so much. I'll be coordinating this session on site, and Frantishtek Fishek will be online. So we welcome everybody, both offline and online, to this session. And we'll be talking about something which is a bit more painful, something that we are not very open to once in a while, but something that we probably need to be more open about. And this is failure. How do we learn from it? What causes it? How can we reflect on it? And how can it improve? How can it improve what we do in our organization? So we would like to send you only one email when we finish the session, and this one email will be a synthesis of the session with more ideas on what we think about our discussions here. And therefore, please scan the QR code and give us your email, and we promise it will only be one email. Unless, of course, you want to chat with me afterwards, then we can talk about that differently. So today it's all about failures, and I'll give you a few moments to scan for those who are scanning still. And really, all of us have experienced a failure. All of us have experienced a failure, and the whole idea of us discussing failures is not exposing the exact weaknesses, but actually developing ways of improving ourselves from these failures so that we avoid them in our next projects and programs, and those in research. So feel very welcome, and thanks for making time for this. So I'll give a very quick introduction of the session, and that starts with who we are. We are a group of organizations who came together and decided that it's also good to discuss about failure. So we have Water for People, we have Sanitation being represented, we have the World Bank, we have IAVAG, Bill and Melinda Gates, and the University of Western Australia. And specifically, we would, it is a lot of effort from Dr. Linda, from Dr. Danny Barrington, from Miguel Ramirez to put the session together, and among others in the team to put the session together. And I think it's going to be an awesome session, but we have to make it awesome. We have to interact with each other because it's going to be very interactive. So it's not about us alone, it's really about the people in the session, and we are very grateful. What do we expect today in this session? So there will be a very interesting video from Dr. Danny Barrington. He'll be talking about failure, which will be the immediate thing that will follow. And then after this, we are going to have a panel that will share examples of failures in their organizations and how they have learned over time. And this hopefully will give you the confidence to also share your failures in the audience discussions, where you are going to discuss in pairs, and afterwards you're going to form groups. And I see good attendance. I'm very thankful. So we have quite a lot of groups, Ninke. So we are very grateful about that. And then after that, we are going to have a short concluding summary. And then we are going to close the session. So this is what you can expect. So don't go before we close, please. But before we go to the video by Dr. Danny Barrington, I would like you to answer for us this question. We would want to understand from your perspective, who do you think should be the main promoters of technology innovation? Because this is going to be at the center of the discussions that you're going to have. But we also understand that technology does not operate alone. There are regulations, there is financing, there are other issues of capacity, there's issues of space or place. And therefore, the discussion should not be very limited to technologies, but we are going to share some of the technologies that probably have failed over time. So from your phones, just scan the QR code and please let us know who you think should be the main promoters of technology innovation. And I'll give you a minute to answer. So who hasn't scanned? Okay. Good. We still have some scanning. And I think now people are answering. I don't see anybody scanning. So could the IT please support us with showing us what people think? Okay. Oh, and it is growing, eh? So public-private partnerships and private sector seem to be winning. So someone take a very good photo of this for me. I cannot take it from here. I need to analyze it a bit more when I sit down. So without further ado, please, the IT department, please share the video by Dr. Danny Barrington. She could not be with us because she had a family emergency, but we decided that we must have her in the session because she's one of the pioneers of this kind of discussions. So.
Hi, I'm Danny Barrington, a senior lecturer in global health at the University of Western Australia. You might remember me from the times I made a fool of myself on stage at many WASH conferences. Since 2017, I've been working with Dr. Becky Sindel and Esther Shaler on better understanding why failure is so persistent in the WASH sector. So I think everyone here will agree that the main goal of WASH programming is to improve health outcomes through achieving sustainable access for the intended users of WASH services. But programming that doesn't contribute to achieving this sustained access can probably be considered to have failed. And this can be a waste of resources, but it can also fail by having negative impacts on individuals. And this is really what has driven our work. So examples of programs which have clearly not met their intended goals or have resulted in unintended negative consequences are really common. In extreme cases, the users or the staff maintaining WASH facilities have died or been injured. Lots of programs have been deemed successful when they've been completed, but failed to be sustainable in the longer term. Multiple studies have identified the potential and actual negative impacts of CLTS and sanitation marketing programs on individuals' mental health and community social cohesion. And finally, implementers often encourage their users or local entrepreneurs to invest time or money to WASH programming. And when the programming isn't successful in improving WASH, there's then lost opportunity and often actual sunk costs that have been invested by these local stakeholders. So these examples demonstrate how WASH programming, even that which might have achieved some progress towards universal access, might be considered to have failed by at least some of the stakeholders. So we've often been asked what we mean when we say failure. We've deliberately kept our definition really broad, allowing our game show, workshop, and research participants to define it for themselves. It's really common for WASH programming to be reported publicly as successful, whilst many people working on that same programming, or those who are the intended users, consider it to have failed. So we began by using the conference and online game shows as really elaborate icebreakers to get people to discuss failure more openly, which then turned into the Nakuru Accord, and which then led to us editing a special collection of the journal Environmental Health Insights. In addition, we conducted 2 research studies with WASH colleagues around the globe, funded by the Royal Academy of Engineering and the Sanitation Learning Hub. In one, we interviewed 96 WASH frontline professionals in Southern and East Africa about their experiences of failure. And in the other, we interviewed 20 organisations who fund WASH programming to understand their perspective. The journal articles for both of these are forthcoming, but if you're interested in the practical results, you can check out the issue of Sanitation Learning Hub's Frontiers of Sanitation that we published last year. So throughout our data, participants identified 9 really common causes of failure. That caused by low levels of commitment from intended users, that caused by implementers not adequately considering the self-identified needs of the users in planning and design, that caused by idealistic planning, assuming that everything will go to plan and that theories of change are correct from the start, that caused by political motivations and lots of bureaucracy, that caused by poor coordination and communication between WASH sector actors themselves and with intended users, that caused by insufficient human resource capacity or a general lack of funding, and that caused by unrealistic funder expectations. Finally, we also saw that there were a lot of failures caused by WASH technologies which were inappropriate to the local physical environment. Now, once we analysed our data, we noted that the presumed causes of failure sounded really familiar. So we went back to the literature and found publications such as these proceedings of a 1978 symposium on tropical water-related disease, as well as a report from the World Health Organization in 1986, both of which listed essentially the same causes of failure that we're seeing now. And it got us thinking, have we really failed to learn anything from years of research and implementation? So we went back and reflected on how WASH programming has historically attempted to remedy these causes of failure and noticed an overarching issue that appears to be driving them, the projectization of WASH. So all of us here know that WASH tends to be delivered as time and budget constrained projects. And it appears that by delivering WASH in this way, we're often tying our hands behind our backs so that we're unable to actually address these causes of failed projects from the beginning. We really can't expect WASH programming to be successful when implementers are held accountable to funders rather than the intended users of services. Or where funders, despite this general rhetoric of being in partnership, don't trust implementers to spend funds wisely, often tying them up in knots of bureaucracy. Or where intended users aren't involved in the design of technologies and services, but often are expected to be the ones who operate and maintain them to achieve the long-term sustainability. Or finally, where there is no flexibility to account for changing conditions and implementers learning as they go what's going to be sustainable in a given context. So today's session focuses primarily on technology and the role that failure plays. And I'm sure we've all heard that old adage that failure is the mother of invention. So what we need is to consider how we can develop technology, which of course includes failing multiple times, but without harming anybody in the process. Reflecting on the development of WASH technologies in light of what we know about failure in our sector, I suggest there's 3 top things we need to keep in mind when designing technical solutions. 1, we are accountable to the intended users of technologies, not those funding its development. We particularly need to keep this in mind when we're being pressured into design changes from on high. 2, there are limited examples where user-operated and maintained systems have been sustainable. Even if users state at program inception that they'll be able to operate and maintain the system, the reality is that this often isn't the case in the longer term. So how do we design with that in mind? And 3, finally, one for the funders. What's stopping you from being flexible? Is there a need for implementers and designers to come to you with every small change or request? Shouldn't those who are experts in the local context be driving the development process, not bureaucratic loops of paperwork and sign-offs? I hope the session goes well today and that everybody leaves the room feeling like they've learned something from the experiences of others. I hope to see you all in person sometime soon. And in the meantime, don't forget to be fiercely transparent and hold yourself accountable for your own thinking, communicating, and actions. Thanks.
So we will definitely make sure that the appreciation reaches her. And I think it was really good that she could do this for us despite her absence. So I'm going to invite Mr. Martin Gambriel, who has worked for the World Bank for over 25 years, so a lot of experience there, and has been the lead in water and sanitation. And he's a specialist in that area and also a consultant at the bank currently, among other organizations. He's the one who is going to moderate the panel discussion from here onwards. So, welcome.
Thank you, George. Yeah, I was at a very large institution for many years, and a lot of what Danny says resonates with me. It's often very nice in a large institution with projects to be recognized for your success, but not always so good to be recognized for your failure. And I'm sure that resonates with a lot of us where we work. Bureaucratization was certainly a challenge that we come across. And this issue of what's stopping funders from innovating, I think we're going to hear about some of that during this session of Espresso presentations by a selection of experts from the field, who I will introduce one at a time. They each have 5 minutes, and we'll be giving them visual and audio signals when those 5 minutes are up. So I'm going to first introduce Nienke Andreasen. She is a project manager in the management of excreta, wastewater and sludge group in the Sandeck department of IAVAG in Switzerland. She's been active in the wash sector for a decade with her expertise covering the entire fecal sludge management service chain. Nienke, over to you for your pitch to us of failure.
Thank you. Thank you. So I will say something about a device called the Volaser. Some of you may have already heard me talk about this before. And I just wanted to take you through the process of developing this device and the failures and learnings that went into that process. So I made a little timeline for you just to make this a little bit visual. So the Volaser is a device that can measure the volumes of fecal sludge and the volumes of containments in situ, so without having the need to empty a containment. And so this device really grew or was born out of the need to find a way to reliably measure quantities of fecal sludge for the design of management solutions. And we had a lot of discussions and demand with multiple people across the world and many different conferences at how can we best do this. So I wanted to draw your attention first to the ideation phase, because that is where the idea was born. And then we went into product development, which always comes with a lot of failures and learnings. So I'm not going to go too deeply into that because I think it's a normal part of product development. So after the product development phase, we had a working model, a final product. And because there was such a high demand, and we had talked with so many different organizations about this already, we thought, great, we have a product. This is going to take off and cross the world. We were going to launch it at a conference, and then COVID hit. And this is kind of where my timeline goes a bit down, because we failed to then have a strategy to further promote uptake. So I call it a failed strategy because we didn't have really a backup plan. We thought, there is so much demand for this is going to take off. And it kind of stagnated at that time. And that is where our learning came in. Okay, our original strategy didn't actually work, so what do we do next? So what we did as a follow-up from that learning was that we collaborated with several partners across the world who we trained on using the device, and who together, all 7 of them in 7 different countries, collected the same data with the device. Some we sent the device to them, some made it locally themselves. And together as like a consortium, we managed to collect some really valuable data, and kind of these partners became kind of champions for the device, and currently still are. So that is kind of our success. So currently the state of the device is that it is available open source. Actually I have, there. If you want to learn more, that's where you can learn a lot more. This is where you can find all of the how to make it. There's 2 videos, one on how to make it and one on how to operate it. And if you ever have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. But my timeline is not finished yet, because we have this nice timeline with all of these different organizations using it. We saw that really accelerated kind of the spread of the device also to people who were not involved in this kind of network of champions, as I called it here. Great, I'm almost done. So what we currently see is that it's available open source. It's out there, people can use it. But it's not as many people feel like making a device themselves rather than maybe buying it themselves. So one question that we're currently asking ourselves, and maybe this is another learning or failure if you want to call it, is what's the value of the open source, and is that really what our users want, or do they just want to buy a device and then use it in the field themselves? So this is a learning that we're currently working on, and I would love to have some more conversations with people, what your thoughts are at a later point at this conference. But yeah, I'm very positive that it's going upwards from this. Yeah, the end.
Perfect timing within the 5 minutes. That wasn't a failure. I love your curve and the optimism at the end.
Yes.
You're going up.
Of course.
So I was wondering, Nyenke, have you taken this experience to any of the other projects that you're working on?
So this discussion of kind of like dissemination and uptake is not, how do you say, it doesn't come just by itself. It requires definitely some mobilization. So this lesson, we've definitely within our team been discussing a lot also to how that relates to other of our projects and also specifically to products. And yeah, as I've said, this journey hasn't ended yet. So I think that is definitely a lesson that we're taking on also when it comes to the Vol laser.
Thank you, Nyenke. And you can continue that journey with her at her table for the breakout discussion to see how you can engage with that and share ideas with her, and she can share ideas with you. Thank you, Nyenke.
Sure. Do you want me to stay on stage? Or?
No, thank you.
Okay.
So our second pitch is by Brenda Achiro. Brenda is the Country Director of Water for People in Uganda. She's an environmentalist with a Master's in Business Administration, a Master's in Social Sector Planning and Management, and a degree in Forestry and Nature Conservation, and that makes me tired just saying it, let alone doing it, studying it. She has over 18 years of WASH experience working at local, community, regional and national levels. She's worked on and overseen sanitation projects along the entire sanitation value chain and has had a share of her own failures from which she's drawn a lot of lessons, and we're going to hear about that now. So over to you, Brenda.
Thank you. Yes, I'll be sharing about the fecal sludge dumping bay in Kampala. Slide, please, IT team. Okay, so just like the previous presenter has said, this takes a journey. Idea testing, market testing, scale if possible, if you survive, the valleys. Now, initially, our initial idea in Kampala was to come up with a fixed fecal sludge station located in the communities. And at the time, the idea was to reduce the distance that pit emptying entrepreneurs had to move sludge from the community to the treatment plant, which is a bit of a distance away. So we needed to reduce that distance by having community fixed fecal sludge stations. Now, that didn't even go beyond the idea stage, because as we were discussing with the regulator, Kampala Capital City Authority, they said, no, we will not have a fixed station in the community. That's a health risk. Where will the barrels be washed? Suppose it blows up, discussions like that. So we dropped the idea of having it fixed and established in the community. So the next step was then to think about making it mobile. So you see the picture to the left, that's a mobile transfer tank that would literally haul using a tractor out of the community. Now, that did well for about 1 to 2 years, but then we then got a challenge of having to smartly schedule the emptying, because the condition was it should be filled up. If it goes into the community, it should be filled up in the day and hauled away. So a lot goes into making sure that you mobilize different community households to, because the households had to pay for it. So you had to have a number of households mobilized to fill it up in a day and move it away. And, we had some situations where it would get half full, quarter full, and then if you have to move it out of the community, again, it wasn't making business sense when you look at the transportation. So that worked for about 1 to 2 years, and again, that model broke down. And then eventually what was birthed is the dumping bay. It is fixed and located at Lubigi. Lubigi is one of, I think it's one of the largest fecal sludge and wastewater treatment plants in Eastern Central Africa. It's managed by National Water and Sewerage Corporation, so they were able to give us space to have a fixed dumping bay. So the idea is it receives thick sludge from unlined pits, very thick, that is first dumped at the dumping bay to allow for some bit of dislodging before then the more fluid sludge is actually transferred to the conventional treatment plants of National Water and Sewerage Corporation, because just fresh with its thick nature, the treatment plant at Lubridge is not able to receive that. So that is the purpose of the dumping bay currently. The more fluid sludge is transferred to the treatment plants of National Water for further processing. So that has been our story. Right now, at least we are happy that the dumping bay is able to receive first of all, its design is to receive 20 cubic of sludge per day, but it's now being dislodged thrice a day. There's pressure to have it expanded, so I'm glad to say at least it went beyond the idea stage. It has gone beyond the market testing stage, and now there is pressure for scale. More numbers, more amounts are being collected. There's need to expand. Yeah, so that's our story, and Water for People is basically a facilitator of the process, brokering engagement between the entrepreneurs, with National Water and Sewerage Corporation, with Kampala Capital City Authority, and the National Environment Management Institute. We are management authority, so we are a facilitator of the process. Thank you. Good time.
Thanks so much, Brenda. Are there examples of where Water for People have been trying to work with, negotiate with the mandated authorities for services in Kampala to sort of achieve more flexibility about new technologies and new approaches, and perhaps the possibility of failure as well with those?
Exactly. Lots of negotiation has gone into this. First of all, in Kampala, there are three key entities. Kampala Capital City Authority, that is mandated to oversee operations within the city. Then we have National Water and Sewerage Corporation that receives the sludge, and they are mandated to work on the treatment. Then we have the National Environment Management Authority that is focusing at, public health. There should be no spillage. So as you transfer it from the community to the treatment plant, there should be no spillage at all. So brokering conversations with those three entities, of course, hasn't been very easy. It's been phased. With Kampala Capital, I think we got Kampala Capital City accepting a little earlier, but at the first time when we told them about semi-mechanical pit emptying, which is the main approach, they said no, until they realized in the unplanned settlements, a cesspool truck cannot negotiate the roads. People are stuck with fecal sludge. Okay, let's try the semi-mechanical. And they eventually accepted to that. And then they've helped us with the licensing. We had to engage them to officially allow the entrepreneurs to work in the city. So things to do with licensing and signing service level agreements. They've been able to accept to that. Then, of course, National Water and Sewerage Corporation accepting us to put this at the dumping bay, where they're able to give some oversight, but also receive the very thick sludge, which ideally by design, they were not receiving. So we do have National Water also close. We still have some work with the National Environment Management Authority, certainly, and lots of engagements are happening, including actually organizing some exposure visits. We've organized an exposure visit with some of the senior people of National Environment Management Authority, because they make the decision and they just didn't seem to understand it. So we took them down to the unplanned settlements, and it was shocking. For some of them, they actually did not know what was happening. So engaging platforms, talking, using platforms like the National Sanitation Working Group that we have. We've invested in research, so we bring out the facts about what is down there, what they need to see as we influence policy.
Thank you so much, Brenda. A round of applause for Brenda again, please. I'm sure that for many of you working on-site and FSM, a lot of that resonates, and trying to work with utilities who maybe don't want to do things differently resonates with me. So go and join Brenda for that discussion at her table as well. Right, third up of our espresso presentations is Emily Woods. Emily has been working in sanitation in Kenya for over 12 years. She co-founded and currently acts as the Chief Operations Officer at Sanivation, a social enterprise that partners with local governments to provide sanitation solutions for cities in East Africa. Over to you, Emily.
Thank you, Martin. This is really interesting, Brenda, that you went right before me, because we used a lot of Kampala to actually design improved pit emptying in Malindi. But because we only heard your outcomes, I think we were bound to repeat a lot of your failures in the process. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that, and it's very interesting. Keep in mind what she said, which I think is far beyond what we've been doing in Kenya, and you'll see probably, Brenda, we should talk afterwards. So I'm going to talk about Malindi. We actually got some really cool financing, we're talking about the funders, for an innovative grant from Unilever Transform. And the idea was to improve pit emptying in Malindi, as well as prepare both Malindi people and utility for scaling up improved pit emptying. So it was a very interesting fund. Malindi also, very few septics, no sewerage, everyone's on pits. Currently, the pit emptying is manual emptiers jumping in the pit with their buckets and shovels at night, even having to pay bribes to be able to even do that job illegally. And so using what we learned from Kampala, some of the best ideas out there, we had ideas to do gulper, the semi-mechanized emptying that she was talking about, using barrels that then hand-push carts that then go to transfer stations, and then transfer stations to the newly being built fecal sludge treatment plant outside of town. And everyone loved this idea, right? Households were super pumped because they loved having a safely managed pit emptying. They liked not having the sludge being dumped outside their household. They're also really happy with the cost point, because now they could actually pay per barrel rather than a full empty. The pit emptiers loved it, as you can imagine. It was not only an improved, safer option, more dignity, but again, that price point still made it affordable for the majority of households there, so they could keep doing their job as they knew it. And the utility loved it, right? They really saw this as a great way to scale up, and everyone loved it, except not everyone. Because even though you have your direct stakeholders and you usually get them all involved in a project, it's very easy to forget the secondary or tertiary stakeholders who may not be directly involved in a project, but are very good at putting the kibosh or changing things or just the really like coming in last minute and frustrating the system. And we had that. So first problem of perception, which you were talking about, whether that was from the transfer stations, as she mentioned, households having that not in my backyard approach. They were so worried these transfer stations were going to be smelly and gross. We also had a hard perception with some of the other ministries, like Ministry of Health or the local environmental regulator. These are people who aren't up to date on new FSM treatment. They had, or processes. They hadn't heard what was happening in Kampala, but even happening in Kenya, in Nairobi, and Kisumu. And so they were like, no, we can't go backwards. We don't want barrels of waste going through our city. And I think because of that lack of education, lack of capacity, the perception was really hard for them. Land, Brenda talked about this a little bit. Land's always difficult in Kenya. It takes time, it takes legal, but it also takes that perception part. I think buy-in was a big thing we realized, because again, if you get to the end and you tell people about the solution, and they're not part of it along the way, they don't understand those pros and cons and decisions that you made, right? They think you're offering them the perfect solution. And nothing's ever perfect, but we're all trying to get to that outcome we want. Policy was a big problem, so gulpers were not within the accepted improved policy in Malindi. And so these other regulators were just, no, we can't do it. Barrels and hand carts weren't within the policy in Malindi. And because I think they weren't involved at the beginning, it was harder for them to be willing to change that policy. So ultimately, we couldn't do gulpers. We actually had to do trash pumps, which can't empty pit latrines. So then we had to go serve septics, thus defeating the whole purpose we were trying to get to in the first place. And so what you see here on the far right was a trash pump with a large tank on the back of a lorry, which is essentially a locally made exhauster truck. Right, and so at the end, from a pit emptying management innovation standpoint, it was a lot of failure. I think ultimately, though, there's a lot of successes. You know, we got the utility involved. We got politicians talking about poop. We got the people of Malindi excited about the changes in FSM. So there was a lot of great things that we've then taken and now applied to other waste emptying collection. Like we're seeing good progress in Wajir, where we were actually able to get land for transfer stations, but we had to have the time, the resources, and going about it in the right way. So I guess what I want to say is, coming from Brenda to mine, is to stress the importance of talking about the failures, because if you only present, like, there's always learning, there's always successes, but I didn't know all those down troughs that happened in Kampala, and so I think we end up repeating a lot of them. Okay.
That's fantastic. So from the perspective of a for-profit social entrepreneurial company, how has failure informed your strategy, your trajectory, your plans?
Yeah, I think for-profits have a great word for it. We call it pivots. Maybe you've heard it before. And that's really what a pivot is. Either it's an actual failure that you hit, or a perceived up-and-coming failure that's going to come from your risk analysis. And I think private companies really understand the importance of identifying those and of changing, right? That's where I think, that's ultimately why I wanted my company to be a private sector, is because if we're not changing based on the market, based on the needs, based on our clients, then we'll go out of business. And I think that's the benefit of a private sector that you don't necessarily always see in public or research or nonprofit, is that sometimes they can get by with more failures in a way that the private can't. So I think ultimately it's beneficial, probably says why we should all be working together. I also think, though, that we are constantly looking for those funds. And so Danny also talked about earlier about what did you call it? Projectization of the wash space. And so even though we're a for-profit company, we are based in those cities, I'm not leaving Malindi, our funding oftentimes still comes in those projects. And so what's great, we can learn from this. We're not going to leave Malindi, we're going to try again, but encouraging more of that for-profit approach.
So to discuss this further, join Emily at her breakout group. Okay, thanks so much,
Martin.
Emily. Last but not least, our fourth espresso presentation is by Diego Rodriguez. Diego is a lead economist at the World Bank. He's currently based in South Africa, from where he's leading both investment operations and global research initiatives, including the bank's water resilience work and its water in circular economy and resilience wiser framework work as well, all around the world. Thank you, Diego. Over to you.
Thanks, Martin. Nice to see many faces also from the previous session. I want to start also by almost acknowledging a personal failure here. So I was trained, I'm an economist, so I was trained as a pure economist, and when I started working in development several years ago, like 2 years ago, I think, one of the main issues that I was addressing was adoption of technologies for agriculture. And my view as an economist was that economic theory and economic concepts would solve all of the issues of adopting technologies. Now, I realize that we were very wrong as economists, because there are many other issues that are affecting technologies and failures. And here I have some of them, learning from many, many years of working in this topic in the bank and other development agencies. But I would like to concentrate, you have here many of them, but I'll concentrate on mainly 4 main messages from our side. No? The first one is we should not be using technology as a mean in itself, but rather as an end, as an end, but rather as a mean. And by that I mean that technology sometimes, in many of our client countries, is presented and tried to be adopted without properly incorporating it in what is the service provider's objectives. We're trying to improve a service, and technologies is one of the many options that we have. And that has to be fully embedded in these processes when we discuss with the different service delivery models and authorities. The second one is that we have a series of what we call invisible and visible barriers to entry. right? So we have, on the visible side, we have lack of incentives or lack of proper regulatory frameworks that enable, in many countries, the proper adoption of new technologies or lower cost technologies, and those are sort of visible barriers to entry. But then there are a lot of invisible barriers to entry. So we have, for example, collusion of local players, right? That it avoids the entry of new technologies, and these players are very well organized, and they also have access, for example, to political interference. You know? So there is an invisible mechanism there in place that makes very difficult for new entries in the markets. The third point is we need to be very much aware of risk aversion and risk takers. Many of our water service providers, purely because they are public entities, they are very risk averse. They don't want to try new things, new technologies. Engineers tend to be very comfortable with what they know how to apply year after year. And that risk aversion is very, is very clear and translated in almost an additional barrier to entry. And the risk aversion is also very visible in public spending. No? 80 to 90% of what we do in water comes from public spending and grants for capital expenditure, grants for operational expenditures. The conditions to access those grants is very risk averse to change, right? The government wants to provide or give resources and a subsidy to a water service provider, and the conditions are you're going to expand the network, you're going to build this wastewater treatment plant, but there's no incentives for you to change the status quo. And my last point is, I think, is a lack of incentives, not only in regulation. So if we are regulating the sector being a regulation of the service provision service or the service provision market, or we are in purely economic regulation, there is very little discussion within the regulatory framework on how do you incentivize technologies, how do you bring that innovation to the markets, and particularly also in the procurement space, right? So I think those barriers are critical, to address them before we start discussing how to bring these new technologies. Thank you. Oh, yes.
Fantastic. Thank you, Diego. So I was based in Brazil for a number of years, and I've studied very intimately the whole approach to simplified or condominial sewers that some of the utilities are implementing there. And it's about a technology, but it's also about an approach. And the approach is about something that isn't... Ooh, that was your timer. But you're doing very well. And the approach is much like we see in a lot of the work done by Sanitation or by Brenda, with our FSM colleagues who are working with households. The approach with condominial sewers is about going and working with the household, knocking on the door and designing the intervention at the household with the householders, the link to the sewer. And many engineers at the utility said, we're not doing that. That's not what we're doing. It's been implemented for 30 years now, and now it's part of the way they do it. It is entrenched in their processes. So it's the technology plus the approach, which is really interesting. And I was wondering, Diego, at the bank, big institution with lots of money, do the World Bank's procurement processes, do they help or do they hinder innovation in technologies and approaches to doing things differently?
Yeah, I think, if I would put a lot of eggs in one basket, it would be on changing procurement. Both, I think from the bank we are advancing, but you see a lot of hurdles in the country level. And we need to acknowledge also that this is national procurement across sectors, right? It affects not only water, but across the board. So how do you engage with national agencies beyond water to make those changes? Similarly, very much linked to that is the regulatory framework. No? So the regulatory framework, which will be linked on procurement processes as well, needs to be changed. And in many cases is regulatory, national regulatory agencies across more than one sector that you need to, where you need to make those changes. And related to that, I would insist also on public resources and incentivize, rather than promoting, for example, output or input-based infrastructure, no? Build this treatment plant, or this network, or build this sanitation system, whether it's sewered or non-sewered, try to bring the additional resources to incentivize change, right? Absolutely. You improve the service provision, you get the grant.
So, and in fact, again, in Brazil, where many people have sewers, or there are sewers in front of their households, but they're not connected, the bank has results-based financing based on connecting the unconnected, and you put the onus on the entrepreneurs through the procurement framework to go to those households and make the connection work, and then you measure them on whether, and you reimburse them based on whether that's happening or not. So the procurement and the financing coming together are really important in that regard. I'm going to ask you to stay on the stage and invite up our three other espresso presenters, so we can take, before we break into groups, we can take a few questions from the audience. Do we have a roving microphone?
This one.
If you have any questions, I see a gentleman in the back.
Yes, thank you. My name is Sheifumi Adebote. My question is particularly addressing the need for flexibility when implementers need to carry out projects. How do you balance this flexibility with accountability also as a funder? Thank you.
As a funder, I think you said. Do you want to go first on that?
As a funder? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Flexibility and accountability, and you can all have a...
Yeah, I think what Martin alluded to as an instrument, this performance for results, I think allow us to work a lot of those factors in terms of both accountability and flexibility. Usually the way that these programs are structured are very much looking towards real outcomes, right? Based on complying with certain targets that are monitored throughout the duration of the program, being 5, 6, 7 years, in a very transparent manner. So you usually are part of the program is that you hire or you contract a third-party verification agency that will be responsible for monitoring that, and that's not the water service provider, not the government. It's an independent entity, and the independent entity is the one that ensures that they can measure and account for the results, right? And the flexibility is done because you have to comply with certain targets and indicators, but the program is very flexible on how do you get there. You are not forcing, you're not mandating and saying this is the type of works or infrastructure or service that you're going to do. I am concerned with what is the end result of that, and that brings a lot of flexibility in how do you get there.
Great. Would anyone?
I'll quickly dive in. So we do a lot of large-scale fecal sludge treatment plants. That's what we're doing, and we've gotten funding by the World Bank, so I'll speak on my side of that procurement, and an interesting one. The way I understand it is that a lot of the way that the World Bank's doing the procurement right now is because of past issues of corruption. Yeah. And so they would do a procurement as a design, build, operate, giving one contractor the ability to do all of it. But what happened, it was not the best contractor would win. Yeah. And the whole thing and a lot of funds would be lost. And so they've switched now, and what's really common is doing design, bid, build, which was trying to set up more of that accountability that you're talking about. But what's happened in that is that you're also seeing a lot of failures, because the design teams ultimately only being paid and evaluated on the design being complete. And the build team is only being evaluated on the build being complete. And it mixes up those priorities and those aligning of risks. And so we're trying really hard to work with the bank in Kenya to push back to more of DBO options, or look back at more concession financing that would be over multiple years, again, based on those outputs. And so I think you're right, those outputs allow you to still have accountability, but give the people who are on the ground the flexibility to change.
Excellent. Anyone else on accountability and flexibility? Are we good there?
Yeah, we have one more question here, quick.
Well, I was just going to check whether there are... We always forget the people online. It's very frustrating when you're outside the room. Is there anything? No questions. Perfect. We didn't forget.
Okay, thank you. Pierre from the Japan Sanitation Consortium. And I'm working a lot in Asia, and I was very interested by Brenda's presentation. It doesn't mean that I was not interested by the other ones, but so I think the transfer station is a great solution for fecal sludge management, because particularly in different countries of Asia, you see that open dumping is often happening because the discharge place is far away from where the dislodging has occurred. And I wanted to ask you, because one of the problems with transfer station is the public opposition, because nobody wants to see trucks coming and going, and also the discharge, I guess the smell as well, the odor is also a problem. So could you please elaborate more on the issue you had to convince the people locally to accept the facility you explained in your presentation?
Yeah, thank you. Well, so the final facility, which is the dumping bay, is actually located in a gazetted area. It's located within the gazetted area of the Luigi treatment plant, the one of National Water and Sewerage Corporation. So it's gazetted for that. So we didn't get a lot of opposition for that. We instead got for the mobile stations and the initial idea. That's why it didn't happen. So where it is now, it's gazetted. It is within the National Treatment Plant. Yeah.
Mm. Last question for now.
Oh, a lot of pressure. My name's Liz. I work at a university in Switzerland. I have a question for, I guess, Emily and Brenda. So in academia, we're used to writing papers, and they follow this very long time frame, and it's years potentially before something comes out. And you talked about sort of rapidly understanding what her challenges were. So I wanted to know, maybe from your perspective, Emily, how do you want to consume information? What kinds of things are you reading? And what kinds of things are you, Brenda, releasing? And how can we speed up this transfer of knowledge between the different sectors?
Yeah, do you want me to dive in first? Yeah, sure. I do not believe that peer-reviewed journal articles are good for sharing failures and learning from. I just want to start there. I do love, again, I want to give a shout out to Unilever Transform and other people who are doing these innovative financing that give you the space of low-risk financing to go try something new. And I think those are great when you have a good consortium and you can bring on the researchers who have something in the lab and want to come test it out in a very low-risk environment. And so I think that's incredible. There probably should just be more partnerships. Yeah. I also think a lot of things that are developed in the lab forget the foothold of reality. And so even in that development process and those first ideation, I think, Linda, Liz, you guys do it really well of as you were talking about your piece of equipment, you were in the field testing it originally and ideating that. I think that's really important. I guess what I'm trying to say is ultimately, I don't think just publication helps. There's got to be just collaboration, and we need to meet each other. These events are great for it, and having more of those conversations are probably best.
Brenda.
Yeah. Just very quickly, to add to what Emily has said. So for us, we look at both ways. We work very closely with Makerere University for that bit of the academic approach, but then we also look at action research, where we basically have fact sheets coming out, process documents coming out, and sharing them at the different fora, because we're looking at pieces that can be easily consumed, easily understood by the regulators if you're going to influence change and policy. Great. They may not read the journals.
Fantastic. And Yenke, from the research perspective, vis-a-vis practitioners, how do you see this challenge?
Yeah, work together.
Great. Learn from each other. Before presenters, panelists, no, you can stay on this because George is coming up now to distribute you and to explain what we're doing next. So thank you again, panelists.
Okay. So, thank you very much to our panelists. Before I give the follow-up instructions, I'm going to let Ninka do one quick energizer. She's our energizer expert in the office because we need to liven up for the next session for the next part of the session. So,
So I know it's Thursday and it's the last day of the conference. So just to wake everyone up so that you're ready for your action in this session, I just want to ask you all to stand up. That's always the first start of an energizer, stand up. And what we're going to do is we're going to shake our right hand 8 times, left hand 8 times. Wait, I'll give you instructions first. Left hand 8 times, right foot 8 times, left foot 8 times, and then we do 4 times, 2 times, 1 time. Okay, we'll all do it together. Make sure you don't hit somebody in the face, because you still need to work together after this. Good. Okay, ready? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 times. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 2 times. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. 1 time. 1, 1, 1, 1. Very good. You're awake? Then you can sit down again.
No, I think that's better. I think that's better. Yes, we have an awesome office. And she helps us make it more awesome. So in our next session, so in our next part of this session, we are going to join in couples. So we are going to have two sets of instructions. For those who are online, I'll give you instructions after this. For those who are here, I want you to turn to your neighbor and look at the questions on the slide for the next about 10 minutes. And we would want to exchange and learn what is your experience with failure, what exactly happened, what did you learn from it. So for those on site, I want you to pair up in twos, just on the table that you are in. You pair up in twos, and then discuss this for the next 10 minutes. For those online, you'll be sent to groups by Francis Tech, and you'll discuss the same thing. Now, the idea of this is, first of all, to know your neighbor in case you don't know your neighbor, because after this, we are going to go into a larger group session. So the 10 minutes start now. So turn to your neighbor, discuss these questions, and that's it. So now I see everyone is very busy and happy. So yes, so thanks everybody for the energy in the conversations, and I like the conversations. And the idea of all this is to have these conversations about failures and proceed having them. So now we are going to divide the panelists into groups, and everybody is going to join one panelist, and you're going to discuss a bit further of what you have been discussing, but I'll give the instructions. But I think I first of all let you know who the people you should go to in the groups are. So the first one is Dr. Rinda Strande. So she'll be in one group, so maybe you could choose a table already. Martin, you could choose a table. Sarah, please choose a table. Yes, from Water for People. She's going to introduce herself later. Then Ninke, if you could please raise. Yes, the Energizer person. It's a lot of energy there. So also please choose. Okay, yes. So, all right. And Brenda. Oh, Emily is here, and Brenda, you can also choose a table. And then please, let's follow them. And then I'll be in one of the tables, probably the one on that corner. And then we can proceed with the discussions. So I want to give the question that we are looking at and the instructions that we are going to follow. So we are proceeding with the discussion on the actions that you can implement in your organization to improve how it deals with failure. So this is really a reflection of, at the organizational level, on how to improve failure. So yes, we are looking at the actions that we can help our organizations to improve how they deal with failure. And we are going to now discuss in the tables. For those who are online, you're still going to remain in the groups that you are in and still discuss the same question. Because we will not be having a plenary session for this, we would like to get the insights that you will get through this Menti. So probably one person in the group, you can appoint one person in the group to take a few notes and just send them directly to the Menti. And then we are going to compile this and we are going to send you a synthesized version of it in your email. And this is why on your tables, you also have a QR code where you can register your email if you want to get the feedback for the session. So I will be in that table on that corner, and you can please locate one of the people that I've mentioned and go to their table, and then we can do this very quickly in the next 10 to 15 minutes maximum. Hi, everybody again. I know the conversations are very interesting, but this is just the beginning of the conversations about failure. So make sure you get the contact of the other person and you continue with these discussions and exchange among the organizations. So now, so 20 seconds and then you wrap up the discussions, please. So now 20 minutes for wrapping up is done. I would like us now to come back to the main session and get out of the break rooms, but remain on your tables, please.
It's great, so great that everybody's talking so much.
Daniel, talk to your table. Come back. Yep.
And then we'll wrap up the session.
Yes, but I'm very grateful that the conversations are happening. I would like to invite Sarah Bramley. She is a CIO at Water for People, and she'll tell us more about what the I means. As she gives a short closing plenary, and then after that, I'm going to come back, and then we'll close the session. So.
Thanks, George. Good morning, or afternoon. Are we in afternoon yet? I think we're in afternoon. Thank you, George. My name is Sarah Bramley. I am Water for People's Chief Impact Officer. Not innovation and not information, impact. But a lot of that impact really is coming from the ability to adapt and learn and grow from our experiences. And so I think that is one of the things that impact is related to innovation, because it really does require that learning. This has been a really terrific session, and I've been given the big challenge of summing it up in 3 short minutes. So here we go. I first want to thank all of the conveners for this terrific session, and thank you to the presenters, to the panelists. It is hard to stand up here and talk about failures. It is hard to stand here and say, you know, we missed the mark. That did not go the way we wanted it to go. And it's really, really, really important, because we can only grow as a sector if we acknowledge those times that we did not get it right. If we had all of the answers, we would all be doing other things. That everyone around the world would have safe drinking water. We would not need to be doing a lot of the jobs that we're doing. Some of us would have other jobs within the sector, but some of us would be owning flower shops or something else. So, we have to keep learning, we have to keep growing, we have to keep sharing. I love the title of the session. Is failure a key step in mainstreaming technology innovation? I think from this session we can all say, yes it is. But I don't think it's the only thing. And I think that's a lot of what we heard of today is that the technology itself, just changing for the sake of changing, is not going to do what we want it to do. So what do we need to do? We need to remain flexible. And so whether that's working with funding sources that are flexible, or for funders to have more flexibility, we have to be able to have that flexibility so that we can adapt. And that adaptation is really the key to what we are all doing. As we're doing that adaptation, we are learning and we're reflecting quickly. And the discussion at this table talked about part of that it's not just an annual reflection. It's perhaps a monthly reflection or a quarterly reflection. What is working? What's not working? What do we need to change? How do we need to adapt? How do we need to pivot? in order to make good on what we are trying to do. We need to share. I had picked up on it in Danny's video of the need to share, because if we don't, we are doomed to repeat the same mistakes over and over and over again. I thought that her pulling up those two articles from decades apart and doing the same thing over again is really hard. And we heard about it in the session. We didn't plan it, I don't think, but to hear Emily reflect on Brenda's work and say, oh, you know what? If we had shared earlier, we could have done this differently. And so I think that that takes a bravery and not just an internal reflection, which is really important, but also the ability to share it outwardly and to find those places where that sharing can really take place. And if it's not a journal article, if it is the action research, that's what we need to start doing as a sector so that we can have these conversations and not all innovate the same way everyone else is innovating. I also loved the graphs that we saw, the timelines. This is not a linear process. We are not going from point A to point B. We are going from point A to point C to point D, back to point B. But that is how we're learning over time. And I also heard that it's not just about technology. It's about behavior change. That technology is a really important part of the solution, but behavior change is also. And part of that is being able to listen to all of the stakeholders who are involved, not just the immediate ones, but those folks who are beyond that immediate, to make sure that the changes that we're making aren't going to have adverse effects somewhere else by accident, and to be able to pull those things back together. So I think that really the importance of being transparent, being accountable, being willing to adapt, are all things that I am coming away from this session with. And I just want to, again, thank all of the presenters and thank all of the participants in this great room. And I will hand back to George. I've lost him. There he is.
Thank you very much, Sarah, for this. We are very grateful for the time that you have given us. Some of you have told us a lot of things that you can already see that we have documented. I want to remind you that there's a QR code on your tables. If in case you want to get a synthesized version of this, we will send you only one email. So you can scan the QR code, and then we are going to send you only one email with the synthesis of the session generally, so that you don't lose out on what the other table discussed. Because we are not able to come back to a plenary session because of time. But the one takeaway that we should most likely take from here is that we should continue with the discussions. And I hope that you have exchanged contacts for the sake of this discussion. And as you leave the room, know that this exists. You can also take a photo. Know that this exists, and these are starting points for discussions in your organizations, and we would be happy to continue with these discussions along the way. So we thank you very much. It would be great if we could have a photo for those in the session. As at now, I think we have a few minutes. Do we, Nika? Yes, we have 2 minutes, which we can all come and have a photo, because we are now a family who understand failure and who will talk about failure in our organization. So if we could just quickly line up here. Yes, including you.